My name is Daniel. For 30 years, I was the invisible son, the brother who was good for a loan, but never for a real conversation. I finally understood my place when I paid for my brother's engagement party, only to have him point to a chair in the hallway and say, "You can sit there. The dining room is for actual family." So when the $4,000 bill came, I handed it right back to the waiter and told him exactly who was responsible for it. My family operates like a solar system, where my younger brother, Mark, is the sun. Everything and everyone revolves around him, his dreams, his crises, his latest whims. I was just a distant, stable planet on the outer rim, predictable and uninteresting. I'm a software architect. I solve problems logically. My family's constant, one-sided gravitational pull was a problem I could never debug. Mark is a visionary, or at least that's what my parents call him. In the past 5 years, he started 3 failed tech startups, each one bankrolled by my parents with a little help from me. "It's a loan, Daniel, we swear," my mom would say, her voice full of that special pleading she reserved for Mark's ambitions. The money always vanished, and the apologies were always louder than the promises to repay. When Mark got engaged to Sophia, a brilliant and kind-hearted architect, a part of me was genuinely happy for him. Another part, the tired and bruised part, braced for impact. The engagement party was to be held at the Gilded Elm, a venue so exclusive I had to pull a favor from a client just to get a booking. The call from my mom was a masterpiece of emotional engineering. "Daniel, honey," she began, her voice syrupy, "we need your help. For Mark, for Sophia, this party, it has to be perfect. You know how to handle these things. Could you manage the reservation? We'll settle up with you later, I promise." The later was a black hole. I knew it. But I looked at the life I'd built, my quiet, orderly apartment, my successful career, and a part of me still stupidly craved their approval. Maybe this time, if I made this party flawless, I'd finally be allowed inside. So I agreed. I called the Gilded Elm, secured the date, and put down the $1,200 deposit. I designed a custom digital invitation for them, and even arranged for a violinist because Sophia loved classical music. I was building a throne for myself at the family table, one meticulous detail at a time, foolishly hoping they'd finally save me a seat. The night of the party, I stood outside the Gilded Elm, my breath fogging in the chilly air. I'd bought a new suit for the occasion, a charcoal gray one that my therapist had told me was an investment in feeling worthy. The irony was a bitter pill in my throat. I could hear the laughter and music from inside, a warm, buzzing hum that felt like a physical barrier. Pushing the heavy oak door open, I was met with a scene of perfect, curated joy. The private room was breathtaking, lit by the soft glow of crystal chandeliers that reflected off the dark, polished wood. My arrangements had been executed perfectly. The violinist played a piece by Vivaldi I'd specifically requested, and there they were, my family, mingling with Sophia's. A vibrant, laughing tapestry from which I felt instantly separate. I took a step forward, a smile tentatively forming on my lips. That's when Mark spotted me. His face, already flushed with champagne and adoration, didn't light up with brotherly affection. It tightened. He excused himself from a conversation with Sophia's parents and strode over, his movements a little too quick, a little too deliberate. "Dan, you're here," he said, his voice flat. He didn't hug me. He didn't even look at the suit. His eyes scanned me up and down as if I were a delivery man who'd come to the wrong address. He then gestured with his thumb over his shoulder toward the arched doorway that led back to the main hall. "Look, we're a bit tight for space in here with Sophia's huge family. We set you up a spot out there. You'll still be able to hear everything." He pointed to a small, high-top table shoved against a wall in the hallway, right next to the restroom entrance. A single stool stood beside it, a place for one. The sounds of flushing toilets and clattering dishes from the nearby kitchen were a stark contrast to the Vivaldi inside the room, my own private purgatory, courtesy of my brother. The air left my lungs in a quiet, pained rush. I stood frozen. The sounds of the party, my mother's distinctive laugh, my father's booming voice telling a story, muffled as if I were submerged in water. I looked past Mark's shoulder, directly at my parents. My mother met my gaze for a fleeting second, her smile faltering into a look of pained helplessness before she quickly turned back to Sophia's mother, engaging her in a conversation with sudden frantic intensity. My father's eyes were fixed on his scotch, studying the amber liquid as if it held the secrets of the universe. Their silence was a confirmation louder than any shout. They were complicit. They had approved this exile. A cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. The hope I'd been carrying, that fragile, stupid thing, finally shattered. It wasn't a dramatic break. It was a quiet disillusion, like sugar and cold coffee. Without a word, I turned from Mark and walked to the high-top table in the hall. The stool was as uncomfortable as it looked. I placed my hands flat on the cold surface of the table and watched the party through the archway like a man watching a play about a family he'd never know. A young waitress approached me, her expression a mixture of confusion and pity. "Can I get you a drink, sir? Are you with the party?" Her voice was gentle, and that gentleness was somehow more humiliating than Mark's dismissal. I nodded, my voice still trapped somewhere deep inside the icy stillness that had taken hold of me. "Just water, please." She brought me the water, and I sat there for an hour, a ghost at my own feast. I watched them toast to family, to new beginnings, to unconditional love. Each word was a small, precise cut. I had orchestrated this entire celebration, poured my money and effort into crafting this perfect night for them, and my reward was a front row seat to my own erasure. The logical part of my brain, the problem solver, finally presented its conclusion. I was not family. I was a resource, and tonight I had been deemed unnecessary for the main event.
The clatter of a dessert cart finally broke the spell of my numbness. The waiter from earlier was now wheeling out an elaborate three-tiered cake adorned with gold leaf and fresh berries, another detail I'd approved and paid a premium for. As slices were distributed amidst laughter and the flash of phone cameras, the same waitress approached me again, this time her posture stiff with awkwardness. "Excuse me, sir?" she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The kitchen sent this out for you." She placed a small plate on my table. It held a single, plain slice of chocolate cake, the kind served to the children's table, or apparently to exiled brothers. It wasn't the gilded masterpiece they were eating inside. It was an afterthought, a consolation prize for knowing my place and staying quiet. I stared at the cake, and something inside me, something that had been bending for 30 years, finally snapped. Not with a roar, but with a cold, crystalline clarity. The problem was no longer my family's behavior. It was my acceptance of it. I had been trying to debug their code my whole life, but I was finally accepting the core glitch. I was not a part of their operating system. I was a peripheral device they plugged in when they needed power. It was at that moment the maitre d' appeared, holding a sleek black leather folio. He scanned the room, his eyes briefly meeting mine before he moved past the archway and directly to my father. I saw my dad's face flush. He gestured vaguely, said a few words, and then the maitre d' nodded, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed, unerringly, back on me. He walked over, the bill in his hand feeling like an indictment. "Mr. Walker," he said, his voice respectfully low, "the final tally, including the gratuity, comes to $4,217. Shall I process this with the card on file?" Every conversation in the private room had died. Every eye was on us. I could feel the weight of my family's stare, a mixture of expectation and anxiety. Mark had a smug, confident smirk, as if this were the most natural conclusion in the world. Of course I would pay. I always did. I looked at the maitre d', then at the black folio, and then I slowly, deliberately, pushed my untouched plate of chocolate cake to the center of the table.
"I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the tense silence. It didn't sound like my voice. It was steadier, colder, the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. "That party in there," I continued, nodding toward the archway, "is for family only. I was explicitly told that I am not part of it. Therefore, I am not responsible for the bill." The maitre d's professional composure flickered. He glanced between me and the silent, staring crowd in the main room. "But sir, the reservation, the deposit, it's all under your name." "The deposit was a gift," I replied, locking eyes with my brother, whose smirk had finally melted into stunned disbelief. "Consider it my engagement present. The remainder of the bill belongs to the host of the party, and since I am merely a guest seated by the restrooms, that isn't me." My mother shot up from her chair. "Daniel, for God's sake, what are you doing?" she hissed, her face a mask of sheer panic. "Don't be difficult. This is your brother's night." "Difficult?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Mom, I'm just following the seating arrangements. Mark was very clear about where I belong." I turned my attention back to the maitre d'. "You'll need to take that to my father, or to my brother, the groom. They are the heads of this family. Let them act like it." The silence in the wake of my words was absolute. You could hear the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. My father's mouth was agape. Mark looked like a fish gasping on dry land, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. Sophia was staring
staring at him, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. I had not just refused to pay a bill, I had ripped away the carefully constructed facade, and I was forcing them all to look at the ugly truth festering beneath. I stood up, my stool scraping loudly against the marble floor. "Now, if you'll all excuse me," I said, my gaze sweeping over the frozen tableau of my family, "it seems my part here is done."
I didn't wait for their response. I turned my back on them, on my mother's stunned face, my father's sputtering outrage, my brother's incandescent fury, and walked away. My footsteps echoed in the hushed hallway, each one a firm final period at the end of a sentence I should have written years ago. I didn't look back. I pushed through the main doors and out into the cold, clean night air, which felt like freedom after the suffocating atmosphere inside. My phone began to vibrate in my pocket before I'd even reached my car. A quick glance showed the screen lit up with calls. First my mom, then my dad, then Mark. I silenced it and got behind the wheel, my hands steady for the first time all night. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion and a strange, quiet peace. I had drawn a line in the sand, and for once, I was standing on the right side of it. When I got home, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat in the dark. The unopened bottle of vintage wine I'd meant to give Mark and Sophia sitting on my coffee table like a tombstone. The phone continued to buzz, texts flooding in. My mom, "You humiliated us. How could you be so selfish?" My dad, "That was a childish stunt. Call me." Mark, "You're dead to me. You hear me? Dead. And you're still paying for that party." I was about to turn my phone off entirely when a new message popped up. It wasn't from a saved number, but I recognized it from the group chat. It was Sophia. "Hi, Daniel. I know this is weird, but can I ask you something? Did you really plan the whole party? My parents are asking." I stared at the message. Of all the people, I hadn't expected her to reach out. I took a slow sip of whiskey, the burn grounding me. This wasn't her fault. She was just another person who'd been sold a beautiful lie about my family. I typed back a simple, stark truth. Yes, I booked the venue, paid the $1,200 deposit, arranged the violinist, and designed the invitations. They asked me to. The 3 dancing dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Her reply was a long time coming. "They told my dad you insisted, that it was your gift. He's not happy. He feels lied to." And there it was, the final cascading consequence. They hadn't just used me. They had used my credit and my effort to fabricate a narrative of familial generosity for Sophia's wealthy, respectable parents. And now the curtain had been pulled back.
I didn't reply to Sophia's last text. What was there to say? Sorry, my family lied to yours to look good? The damage was done, and it was their mess to clean up. I spent the weekend in a bubble of serene silence. I ignored the barrage of texts and voicemails that shifted from anger to desperate pleading. I went for long walks, cooked myself elaborate meals, and slept better than I had in years. The weight of their expectations finally lifted from my chest. The real explosion came on Monday morning. My phone buzzed with a call from Aunt Lydia, my mother's older sister. Lydia was a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney who had always viewed our family's dynamics with a mixture of amusement and disdain. We weren't close, but there was a mutual, unspoken respect. "Daniel," she said the moment I answered, her voice crisp and devoid of small talk, "I hear you set off a nuclear bomb at the Gilded Elm." "I suppose you could say that," I replied, bracing for a lecture. Instead, she let out a short, dry laugh. "Ha, good. That house of cards was long overdue for a collapse. Your mother called me in tears, saying you'd publicly abandoned the family and ruined Mark's engagement. She left out the part where they sat me next to the men's room, I assume?"
Of course she did. The version I got was that you were sulking and refused to fulfill a promise. But I've known your brother my whole life, and I've watched your parents enable him. I put the pieces together. She paused. I'm not calling to mediate. I'm calling to tell you that Sophia's father, Robert, is a client of my firm, a very influential client. My blood ran cold. What? Your mother begged me to talk some sense into you, to get you to apologize and smooth things over with the Whitmans. So I had a conversation with Robert this morning to assess the damage. She took a deliberate pause. He is livid, Daniel, not at you, at them. He said any family that would treat their own son with such public contempt and then lie about financial arrangements is not a family he wants his daughter marrying into. I sat down, the breath knocked out of me. This was far bigger than I could ever imagined. According to Robert, Lydia continued, her voice clinical, the wedding is officially on hold, indefinitely. So when your mother calls you screaming today, and she will, remember this. You didn't cause this. You were just the one who finally stopped pretending the cracks weren't there. The sheer absurdity of the situation washed over me. My aunt, the divorce attorney, ornery and perpetual outsider, was now the central intelligence in the storm I had unleashed. I thanked her and hung up. Predictably, 15 minutes later, my phone lit up with my mother's face. For the first time, I answered. I didn't let her launch into her rehearsed tirade. "Lydia just told me everything," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "About Robert, about the wedding being off." A sharp, almost hysterical inhale came from the other end. "And are you happy?" Her voice trembled with a mix of fury and devastation. "You've ruined your brother's life. You've ruined everything." "No, Mom," I replied, and my voice held no malice, no glee, only a weary, final clarity. "I didn't ruin it. I just stopped lying about what it was built on. You and Dad and Mark, you built his life on my back. And when you told me I wasn't even family enough to sit at the table, the foundation crumbled. You did that, not me." There was a long silence, broken only by her shaky breathing. The familiar script of blame had failed her. For the first time, I wasn't apologizing or backing down. I was stating facts. "He's your brother," she whispered, a last desperate plea. "I told me I was dead to him," I reminded her gently. "I'm just honoring his wishes." I took a deep breath. "I need to go now. Don't call me again unless it's with a real apology. Not for the bill, but for the chair. For every single chair you've ever put me in." I ended the call and powered off my phone. The silence in my apartment was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a presence. It was peace. The following weeks were a study in quiet detachment. I kept my phone off for 3 days straight. When I finally turned it on, the storm had passed. The frantic calls had been replaced by a deafening digital silence. The family group chat, once a constant, buzzing reminder of my peripheral existence, was dead. I felt its absence not as a loss, but as a removal of a tumor. I learned through a terse, formal email from my father, the first he'd ever sent me, that Mark had moved back into their house. The email didn't ask for money. It didn't ask for anything. It was just a sterile update, an acknowledgement that the dynamics had irrevocably shifted. My mother didn't contact me. Her silence was her confession. Then, one evening, a final email arrived from Sophia. It was short and gracious. She thanked me for my honesty during the chaos, which had confirmed the doubts she'd been suppressing. She said she had called off the engagement entirely. "It wasn't just the dinner," she wrote. "It was seeing the person you are, capable, strong, and principled, treated with such contempt by the man I was going to marry. It made me see a future I didn't want." She ended by wishing me well. I closed the laptop, feeling a chapter of my life seal itself shut with a quiet, definitive click. The money from the deposit was gone, a small price to pay for my freedom. The money I had previously lent them over the years, I formally wrote off in my mind, a debt forgiven for the sake of my own sanity. I was finally, truly free.